Okay, it's 2023. Can anybody afford to rekey a day's worth of work? Not only can you not afford to do it, you probably can't actually do it because you don't have the paper trail anymore. 10, 20, well, not even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you probably had a paper trail. You could go out on the floor and you could find tickets and receipts for things and you could probably put them back in. You can't do that now. That stuff doesn't even exist. You basically, if you lose your data, you're out of business. You have no way to recover. After imaging allows you to do roll forward recovery to a point in time. So you have the after image logs, you rebuild the database, you roll forward to the recovery point, which is wherever your last after image log was. You don't lose 24 hours or a week's worth of data. You're back in business. It might take a minute or two while you get there, but you'll be there quickly. What you don't want to be doing is taking snapshots with your VM or your SAN. VMware snapshots, Veeam, or any of the SAN snapshotting things, they don't know about OpenEdge. They don't know how to synchronize an OpenEdge database, and they're not going to do it right. It'll work great in your test environment. You'll think it's wonderful. You'll try it, you'll test it, you'll restore it, everything's wonderful. But you know what? Your test environment isn't real. When you do it in production, that's when you're going to make that phone call. Oh, my database is corrupt. What can I do? And you're going to find out you can't do anything because your database has been corrupted. If you don't have the after image logs, you're out of luck. Nobody's going to be able to help you. And unfortunately, people keep making that mistake. We get a couple of calls a year about this. People who didn't have their after imaging turned on, and now they want some help. Mike, how many did you used to get when you were in DBA?
We only know about it when it's bad, right?
You're right.
So I think for us, we were more hands-on, so we monitored it well and were active on it, but the people that made a mistake and turned it off, and we were aware of it, but never could get them to turn it back on, it only became a problem when it became a problem.
Yeah, right.
And I'd say that would happen probably once a quarter.
Yeah, a few times a year.
Yeah,
You'd have that.
2 to 3 times a year.
Wait, Tom?
Yes.
vMotion, the same apply then for that? vMotion?
vMotion, yeah, same issue.
Yeah.
It looks like it works great
Yeah.
in your test environment where you don't have a whole lot of volume, but it falls apart afterwards. James?
I've had to recover a trash database because of vMotion, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, so there's real user experience back there. Yes.
And I was at Hug a couple of years ago, and somebody was doing development, and they were restoring snapshots, or they're taking snapshots. And they said 9 out of the 10 snapshots worked, and that was in a development environment. So you get a 90% success rate with this whole vMotion, snapshotting, all that is.
9 out of 10.
So that means there's a
Using your database
100%
integrity.
chance you're going to lose it.
Right.
Exactly.
But what about using the quiet mode and taking a snapshot?
So yeah,
That
so
works.
you need to have a ProQuiet, but you got to do ProQuiet correctly. So you can't just issue the ProQuiet command and assume that the database has been quiesced. You have to issue the ProQuiet, and then you have to monitor the log file to ensure that the quiet point actually took place. They don't always take place right away. There can be a gap there. So if you ProQuiet and then your script makes a snapshot, you're not getting what you think you're getting.
That's right.
And even so, you would want to have after imaging. Because after imaging is not just about database crashes and hardware failures and that kind of thing. It's also about fires, servers getting stolen. That really happens. People back up trucks to data centers and fill them up with servers and drive away with them. Human error, RN-RF star. You laugh. I know of cases. It's happened. Or for each order line where line number equals 1 delete order and end, kinds of things. Or I had a programmer who once did this. They were writing an update to some lending software where the function that they were supposed to be implementing was to delete a borrower. Well, they forgot to put the loan number in the where clause. So the first time an end user went to delete borrower number 2, they didn't delete one borrower number 2. They deleted all borrower number 2s.
And I would say this was a much more common problem that
Yeah.
after imaging solved than just having some sort of hardware failure.
Yes.
This was having a program that they needed to restore before it happened, or restore to another database and then dump the data out and load it. That was probably almost monthly.
Yeah, and after imaging will save your life in so many different ways. It's an important thing to have in any production environment. You really need to have it. It should be on by default. Another thing to remember is that the ideal database server is not alone. So if you get your server configured the way you want to have it, it shouldn't be the only one. In the modern world, you really need to have a DR server, and you probably need high availability if your business is of any significance. So you probably want to have replication. So you have a server, you have a replication target, you might have a disaster recovery target alive in real time, located somewhere else, hopefully in another time zone. You want it far enough away so that everything doesn't all fail at the same time. Having your DR, your HA, and your production server in the same rack is probably not a good idea if the one on the bottom catches fire. They're all going to go up in flames at the same time.
Surely you want them all on the same virtual host, Tom.
Oh, yeah, the same virtual host. Yes, an excellent plan. Yeah. And you probably want a full-size test server, because if you're really into this kind of stuff, you need to test things. You need to do testing as if it's production. You need to test the same way you run in production. If you don't, then what are you really testing? And how do you ever test that your failover and your DR policies are really correct, unless you have a test environment where you can try things out? So the ideal database server has a relatively small number of very fast cores. You need at least 2. You almost certainly don't need more than 8. There are people who need more than 8, but there aren't very many of them. So most of you need somewhere between 2 and 8 cores. I have never seen a database server that actually needs 48 cores. I've seen lots of database servers configured with 48 cores, but I've never seen one that needs 48 cores. You need plenty of memory. In today's market, 64 gigabytes is an afterthought. It's what's on your watch. If you have, a watch, an Apple Watch or something like that, you probably have 64 gigabytes in it. A terabyte is starting to look like the low end of a server purchase these days. You get a lot of memory at a relatively inexpensive price. And you should plan to use 25 to 50% of it for your buffer cache, because big buffer caches are way more performant than small buffer caches. If you have dash B 100,000, you're not even trying. If you have dash B 1,000,000, okay, all right, that's good, it's a good start. Let's keep going. You can go much higher than that. Internal SSD. If you're all about performance, you need internal solid-state disks. It will be radically faster than any SAN that you will ever buy. It's also cheaper, as I keep mentioning. And if you have no idea how your database is going to grow, just assume it's going to be 10 times bigger in a couple of years than it is today, because data growth is out of control. Everybody's data is growing wildly for all kinds of reasons. You're blogging things, you're putting notes and things into your database, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger every time you turn around. It doesn't do you any good to try to purge it, because the demand for putting more data in there is faster than you can purge it. You need a couple of fast network interfaces, one for the users and another for administrative things like replication or backups, that kind of thing. Also for redundancy and failover. You don't want to have just a single point of failure. Dual power supplies. It's really wonderful to be able to pull a power supply out of a server or pull the plug out of a wall while you're moving the server and kind of move it down the hallway and things in. It's really fun. First time I did that, I really didn't believe it was going to work. But it did. That was great.